Where Nothing Bleeds by Interstellarism on AO3. Episode 2, Chapter 2, Acquired Signal. Grace thought that being able to experience Eridian culture was going to be the highlight of his new future. It's an entirely new planet with a native species so complex, it would probably take Earth scientists centuries to even study their basic biology. And he was getting a front row seat to that. Surely, there was nothing more exciting than that, right? Wrong, apparently. Even if you were in an already impossible situation, the universe finds a way to make it impossibler. There is a heartbeat. That's what Rocky said. They were watching the rustling submarine shaped object from afar, and out of nowhere, Rocky had pointed out that he could hear a human heartbeat from inside. Is human. Pattern same as Grace. Slower. Quiet. Funnily enough, he remembered feeling more dread in the pit of his stomach than when Rocky and he first met. He nearly threw up into his Eva suit again. Because seeing another human out here meant that either Strat got impatient and decided for some reason to send another ship, or another country tried to make their own Hail Mary, failed, and this was them finding their torture chamber. Because that's what it looked like. The ship didn't even look like a spaceship. It looked like a weird, archaic submarine. He had initially assumed it was another alien vessel because no human scientist in their right mind would send something that looked like it was made of rusted spare parts into the deep bowels of space. And even if they were insane enough to do that, no government would allow it. Unless so much time had passed that vigilante groups had formed, exactly like in Mad Max, just as Grace suspected. And they could make their own shoddily made Hail Marys and send them off into deep space. No, the Hail Mary was impossible enough on its own, and it took all of the world's geniuses, power, and resources for it to even be possible. It took destroying and completely uprooting the Sahara Desert for it to even come into fruition. No other spaceship could catch up with it in terms of advancement, let alone a rusting bucket like that. SM-13 was carved onto its side. That was probably the name of the vessel. He really thought that he was done playing hero. However, Rocky confirmed that there was a human heartbeat, so he was forced to go out there and retrieve them. The door had been welded shut, and he had to use a plasma cutter to open the hinges. That in itself told him that whoever was inside the thing was no scientist or astronaut. They were caged in it, and whoever did it to them clearly intended for them to stay in there for good. It definitely felt like the works of some sort of evil vigilante group. If not, then maybe an Earth-like human species from yet another distant solar system who wanted to solve the Talseti problem, just like him and Rocky. But there was no time to dwell on it, especially when the door opened, and he saw that it was absolutely a human being from Earth. He remembered suspecting his belief at first, given that he was more worried about the state of the man rather than what got him there. The man was coated, head to toe, in what looked like dry blood. If the robot nanny hadn't scanned him as alive, then he would have definitely assumed that the stranger was either skinned alive or dead. There wasn't even a spot of flesh visible from all the red. It was incomprehensible. There was no possible explanation to his existence out there, especially under those conditions. He was caked in blood and yet still had a heartbeat? The arm did all the work for him at the time. It scanned the man, flagging everything wrong all at once. Then it got to work. Grace watched it clear his airway first, suctioning and pressuring adjustments working together. He helped it push oxygen, stabilizing his vitals, and pumping in fluids to counter whatever the hell the man had been exposed to. Hopefully, it wasn't radiation. If it was, then he definitely should be dead. But he was alive. He looked like a really bad radiation victim, but somehow, in some way, impossible way, he was alive. Grace had never seen anybody fight so hard to live. It was a will that should be scientifically impossible. But he had his fair share of impossible moments already, so maybe this wasn't all that surprising. So they took him back to Erid. He was out and unconscious for most of the time when Rocky introduced Grace to his people, built his little earth dome, and gave him a class of little Eridians children to teach. Grace had to take apart Commander Yala's bunker so the man could have somewhere comfortable to rest. He's sure he wouldn't mind. The arm had to give him a thorough cleaning from head to toe, which thankfully it had practice with, given how it was built to care for comatose patients. Grace made sure not to stay in the room when it did that. He spent his days mulling it over his head. But no matter how hard he thought, there was no possible answer for us to how the man got there, nor what happened with that submarine. Ship? Submarine ship? He had no idea how such a structure could even be launched, let alone survive in space. The only answers he'd got were from the man himself. And now he was awake, and he was such a different sight than when he was asleep. The first thing Grace noticed were his eyes. They were a shade of deep, stormy black. They matched the dark, unruly hair, as well as the hair on his chest and jaw. He was rather handsome. Yes, he felt some shame in admitting that. The man just woke up from a coma, and he was probably confused and terrified. He really shouldn't be thinking of how attractive the stranger was. He was big, too. Very big, now that Grace was seeing him sat up. Those biceps could only belong of that of a soldier, or some sort of seasoned officer. Sure, Grace was ripped when he woke up from his coma, but that was just from the machine stimulating exercise. This guy had battle scars. He seemed like some military official. Was that what he was? But what was a soldier doing out in deep space? This was definitely out of his pay grade. Time to find out. He never would have thought one of the first things he'd be studying was his own species. Now that Rocky and I have made our introductions, Grace says, I want to know about you. What's your name? The man fidgets. He doesn't let go of the glass shard. There's probably no helping that. He can't imagine it was easy, trusting a new, unfamiliar place with new, unfamiliar people, and a spider rock. Simon. The man responds. His voice was deep, very, very deep, and very, very distrusting. Grace friend no like you, Rocky, worry. Grace lifts a calming hand towards Rocky. It's funny how quick he switched up. Earlier, Rocky was so happy that he was finally had a friend of his own, and he wouldn't be spending his life on Erid, devoid of all human contact, even though Grace didn't really mind that if it had been the case. Now, Rocky seemed like he'd throw the man back out into deep space if he tried anything. Part of him was touched by that. He can't remember the last time a human cared about him that much, but he already knew Eridians could love greater than their own size. Okay, good start. Simon. That's a nice name. Grace pulls up a chair, careful to keep his movements slow, non-threatening. He tries to make himself smaller, maybe less imposing, even though he's talking to a man who looks like he could definitely kill him if he wanted to. His mind drifts back to the classroom, those moments when a kid would act out, and he would recognize the signs. The suspicion that something was wrong at home, and this was the only way they knew how to cope. Simon, he starts. Do you want to maybe tell me about what happened to you? No. Okay, well, that was fast. Why not? I want you to give me answers. What am I doing here? What happened to the stars? The blood ocean? Why are you alive? A series of questions. Usually, he was great at answering questions. That's kind of his job. But each question he asked was even stranger than the last, and it seemed like it showed on his face because Simon notices and he raises a shard. Answer me! Grace jolts. Rocky immediately starts making aggressive chirping noises, positioning himself in front of Grace and backing himself up against his legs as a sort of shield. Eridians weren't violent, nor were they territory creatures, but if their loved ones were threatened, they care. A lot. He had a feeling Rocky would be watching him sleep for a lot longer after this. Grace takes a deep breath. I already told you why you're here. We found you floating in your submarine, the SM-13. You were inside it when I cut the door open. We saved your life and brought you back here. The stars, well, I don't know if you know about astrophage yet. It's the star killer. It's been going around causing stars to dim, which makes their adjacent planets die. I'm not sure if that's what you mean, but Rocky and I already figured out a fix for it. I don't know what you mean by blood ocean. That sounds terrifying, and I hoped you dreamt that up. And, what was that last one? Oh, why am I alive? I don't know, why are you alive? You really shouldn't be, given how we found you. So we're just two guys who shouldn't be alive, but are anyways. I hope that'll inspire some cooperation, at least. Simon doesn't notice, too distracted by Grace's rambling. The power of words. Grace's own huge mouth is what makes him accidentally important at his job, and it's either his life's greatest blessing or greatest curse. He doesn't notice that Grace had been approaching him, and just as they were only a few inches apart, Grace reaches up and gently pries a shard away from his hand. He takes his rough hand in his own, observing the skin for any injuries. Sure enough, they were minor lacerations from the glass. Simon is quiet. I'll take care of it. Behind him, Rocky seems to be quietly observing. He's still on edge. He could tell. To an Eridian, it probably seemed like he was petting a tiger, and he was bracing for him to get his head bitten off or something. Maybe the staring was making Simon feel uncomfortable. Rocky, hey, bud, can you go out and wait for me there? No, bad, 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 bad. Grace's friend Violent can hurt Grace. Buddy, I promise I'll be okay. I just need some time alone with him. Besides, if anything goes wrong, I'm sure you could heal it from a mile away. He says it both for Rocky's comfort and as a warning for Simon. If he really does try anything, he's sure Rocky's going to bring an entire Eridian military, or whatever they had as their soldier/defense system, to protect him. A few uncomfortable trills and chirps later, and Rocky begrudgingly agrees. If Grace die, we throw him back. Grace save planets. He nap. Useless, useless, useless. He doesn't react to that. He was about to laugh about his confirmed theory, and it would ruin the severity of the situation. He waits until he's sure his friend was gone, before he turns back to Simon. He was holding his hand, still. Grace awkwardly pulls back. He takes out the first aid kit, nearby, and decides he'll do the work this time. The nanny arm's done enough. He pulls out a bottle of alcohol, some gauze, and a few cotton pads. How can you talk to it? Grace lets out a small, awkward laugh, rubbing the back of his neck like he always does when he's about to explain something complicated. Rocky and I had to learn to communicate if we wanted to fix our star issue. He starts, glancing between Simon and his hand. He doesn't speak like we do. He doesn't have vocal cords. His whole species communicate through sounds, but not in the way humans do. It's more like vibrations, musical notes almost, and they use echolocation. Gently disaffecting Simon's hand, Simon doesn't even flinch. Can he even feel the pain at all? At first, I had no idea what he was saying. It just sounded like a random pitches, but Rocky's a genius. Like, way smarter than me, and he figured out a way to map his sounds to concepts. Then, I built a translating system to meet him halfway. Grace's tone picks up slightly with enthusiasm. He's just realizing that he hasn't actually gotten the chance to explain his relationship with Rocky to another human before. It fills him with excitement. He was the first human to make contact with alien life, and the first to befriend it. And somehow that wasn't the subject of their conversation. It listens to the frequencies he pronunciates and converts them into words I can understand, and vice versa. So when I talk, it translates my speech into tones he can interpret. It's not perfect, but it works well enough that we could have full conversations. I also learned to understand him more to the point where I hardly need the translation at all. Simon stares at him. You're a scientist. Molecular biology, but yeah, a molecular biologist. And a school teacher. School. Teacher? In space? On an alien planet? Correct. How's my shit weirder than yours? Grace snorts. It was such a stupid sound that he masks it with a cough. Well, that's what I was wondering. Somehow your situation is even stranger. You just asked me why I was alive. It's a bit weird considering, the Hail Mary, or, my ship, is the most advanced ship humanity ever made. It's made to sustain life, so that's not why I asked that. I asked that because of the quiet rapture. Blinking. The rapture. As in, from the Bible? That rapture? He doesn't think he's heard that word since he was a kid listening to his father talk about it, and how the world was destined for it. Does this mean his father was always right? Yikes. What does that mean? Simon looks away. He's glaring at a wall. Every single habitable planet and star in the universe vanished. The only humans that were left were the ones left behind on space stations. We called it our new Eden. Garden of Eden. The Hail Mary. Funny how things like that carry over. Naming consistencies aside, he can't stop his mouth from talking. This seemed very real to Simon, but he couldn't help himself. Grace shakes his head immediately. But that's not how the universe works. That would violate the principles of physics. He gestures loosely, organizing the idea in the air. You can't just remove all mass energy from the universe without consequences. The universe is governed by general relativity. Space time isn't separate from matter. Mass and energy tells space time how to curve. If you suddenly eliminate all mass energy, you aren't left with nothing in a stable sense. The little geometry of space would become undefined. Simon shakes his head. It happened. The scientist in him refuses to accept it. He doesn't know why he was arguing so hard. Heck, there had been a point where he didn't believe life needed water to survive, and he was dead wrong about that. I'm saying it can't have happened. I mean, it didn't. I came from Earth. I saw Talsetti. Planet Adrian, everything is up and running. You must have dreamt it up while you were asleep. Because if somehow, hypothetically, all mass in the universe vanished instantaneously, the gravitational structure holding everything together would collapse. We wouldn't even be here. Simon doesn't budge. They put me on the SM-13 to find out why it happened. Oh, well, that was hard to argue with since he knew the SM-13 was real. He had seen it with his own eyes. And they sit me down into. Simon proceeds to tell him about a horrific, claustrophobic nightmare story about the blood oceans, the X ray camera he used to see, and the creature with him in the depths. It sounded like something from a horror science fiction novel, but it explained the circumstances when they found him. It explained the egregious amount of dried blood caked onto his body. It explained the weird structure of the SM-13 and how it was made for blood navigation, not water like he had originally thought. It explained everything but the actual quiet rapture itself. Obviously, that part wasn't true, but he can't argue with it more without Simon glaring at him again. And he just patched up his hand. He didn't want him to hurt himself. So, you managed to rescue the black box, and that must have saved you. Something must have pulled you out. From the blood ocean or from the nightmare Simon was describing. He can't fully suspend his belief and say Simon didn't dream it up. And that's why you're here. It's behind you now. Grace says. Simon doesn't answer. Seems like he doesn't believe that. There is one thing I'd like to know. Grace starts, gently fixing the gauze around his palm. Why, you. You said you came from a station. Why did they choose you? His jaw tightens. Grace worries he's nicked a sore spot. I I couldn't remember much when I woke up. But they told me I was a convict, and that this would be my way of serving my sentence. If I succeeded, I could have my freedom. That's what they told me. That's what they were supposed to do. He says bitterly. He clearly was under the impression that that was not what happened. Freedom didn't exactly look like spending the rest of your existence on a random planet with aliens as company. He was forced to go on a mission with no guarantee of returning. One last long shot. Huh. Grace breathes out. We're more similar than you might think. Patting the top of Simon's hand. Then, seeing the look on Simon's face and, okay, pull away. This man made a weapon within seconds of meeting him. He won't be surprised if he can use his own hand against them. I'll go get you something to eat. Something hot to drink, too. Grace stands up and heads for the door. Grace not die. Happy. Dude, were you listening in the whole time? Yes, I watch. I am still trying to figure out, Rocky's voice, but we will get there. That chapter was a little bit of a longer one. All right. It was really, really cool. I know I love the science in this fic specifically. Obviously there's no canon, BloodyMary fic, but out of all of them, I like to picture this one to be like the canon in my opinion, because everybody could choose which one they believe would be like the canonical one, should they actually have like the crossover and stuff. Like if that was the actual movie, I like to think this one would be the crossover sequel of the movies, I really, really love it. I love interstellarism's, explanations of both Simon and Grace, of how Simon and Grace came to meet, how this crossover could even become possible, which we will learn in the later chapters. Do not get me worried. What? Anyways, I don't have much to say. As I said, this is one I've already read, so I will only pitch in when I have things to pitch in. So yeah, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.